in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, the ethical value of societal and political well-being, which is taken up under the scheme for promotion of academic research and collaboration from Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. Our team includes Professor Vishwa Adluri, Professor of Philosophy, Hunter College, USA, Dr. Joydeep Bagchi, Hindu University of America, USA, Dr. Geetesh Nirban from Kamala Nehru College, Delhi University, Delhi, and me, Professor Balaganapati, Head Department of Philosophy, Delhi University. And we are supported by young scholars, Ms. Jayashree, Ms. Anmol, Ms. Deepshika, and Ms. Megha. As I mentioned, the theme of the project is Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, the ethical value of societal well-being. One of the major concerns in taking up this project is to understand the need to revisit the classical texts. In this particular case, it is Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. And this revisiting should not be like mere repeating of the text that is existent there, but to reappropriate it to the contemporary times. So with that intention, we have picked up this project. We have taken up this project, and our major concern or aim is to explicate the universal philanthropic and humanitarian aspects of the text Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, and appropriate these aspects to the contemporary times and contemporary predicaments that we have around us. There are 3 pointers which are very important for the project. They are yoga consciousness in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. As I have been continuously repeating, like when it comes to understanding yoga, Bhagavad Gita is the best text that we have, which includes various aspects, various facets of yoga within it. And the other important aspect that we have as a pointer in the project is ethical values of societal well-being, which we understand as Lokasangraha in Indian tradition, and ethical value of political well-being as well. The very focused question that we address in this project is what is the right course of action? And now today, if we are talking about societal well-being and political well-being, can we talk about these two without a proper ecology around us? Ecological well-being is the one in which whether we are talking about society or polity is situated. So that is the major concern for today's theme that Dr. Pankaj has picked up for the exposition. So that is how ecological well-being forms the major concern and major backbone of any discussion on society and polity and human life as such. So how do we understand human life in Indian tradition is very important in this context. The ways of thinking, the individuals, the human beings, how do they develop their ways of thinking is very important. That means the epistemology of the individuals is the major concern, which helps the life to move forward. So human life is majorly encompassed by the ways of thinking of the individuals and the modes of living of the individuals. What are the different kinds of modes through which we conduct our life is very important. These two aspects, ways of thinking and modes of living, are the ones which in fact exhibit the human life, and these two are always rooted in the tradition to which we belong. That is how Indian tradition specifically, if we look at the ways of thinking as well as modes of living, what we find in Indian tradition is a kind of holistic conception of life, where life of the individual is seen in consonance with the nature. So that was the major emphasis in Indian tradition, which is very important, which is to be noted in the present context. Now, if at all this holistic conception and also living in consonance with nature is stressed in Indian tradition, then what we observe in Indian tradition is also a kind of worship of the nature. We worship the nature, but at the same time, if you look at the contemporary life of people of Indian tradition, we also find that there is at least some amount of um, lack of environmental consciousness among the individuals. So this dichotomy that we see, like at one step, trying to worship the nature, and on the other hand, not really properly taking care of the environment around us, is a kind of, it poses a kind of dichotomy in the contemporary Indian life, which is very important to be addressed. And once we understand this dichotomy that exists in the life, probably it would help us to reflect on it and make an attempt to understand self-analysis and self-understanding, improving self-understanding of the concept as well as the self of the individual, of the contemporary human being. So that is where what is important is to understand the role in general, if we have to phrase it in general, what is the role of religious traditions in safeguarding environment? Which means when we are talking about religious traditions, what we are referring to is spirituality. And when we are talking about environment, what we are referring to is the matter that is existent around us. So how do we reconcile these two, and how the spirituality that belongs to the religious traditions of India helps us to deal with the material world that is around us, material not in the sense of the Western terminology, material in the sense of nature that is around us. So this is to be properly understood. In that context, Dharma is very important. We heard Professor S.R. Bhatt speaking on the first day in the inaugural talk, explicating the concept of Dharma from various perspectives, not just as a societal concept, social concept, but also as a regulative principle, and also as an ennobling principle that gives directives to the human life. We have understood that in the first talk that Professor Bhatt has given us. And in that context, if we are trying to look at Dharma from various perspectives, EcoDharma is one of the very important and much needed concept which we have to delve into. And that is where the work that Dr. Pankaj has done on Hinduism and its EcoDharma is very prominent and relevant. So that is how I see the contribution of Professor Pankaj Jain to the environmental ethics in general, and specifically to Indian traditions that are existent. Because there is no one Indian tradition. There are traditions, many traditions within India. So that is how his work is very important, and I'm grateful that he agreed to be a part of this webinar series and try to address the concerns that he has been sharing in the academic discourses. With these few words, I limit myself, and I request Dr. Geetesh to introduce Dr. Pankaj Jain and take the proceedings further. Thank you so much. Dr. Geetesh.
Thank you, Dr. Bala. Before I go ahead with the introduction of our esteemed speaker for the day, I would like all of you to keep your videos off. It's a request to you to keep your videos off and sound muted so that we have a seamless flow of this session. And as far as questions are concerned, it would be really nice if you send in all the questions in the chat box at the end of the session. We'll try our best to get most of them addressed, because we have a slot of 30 minutes for the Q&A. And the third point I would like to share with all of you is that I would be requesting you to switch on your cameras, the videos at the end of the session for some screenshots, as we maintain a good record of the pictures of all our sessions. So with these three important points, I go ahead with the introduction of our guest of the day. Dr. Bala has already given you the name. Here we have with us Dr. Pankaj Jain. He's an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy and Religion at the University of North Texas, USA. He's a chair of India Initiatives Group and has compiled the history of Jainas and Hindus in America for his latest monograph, Dharma in America, a short history of Hindu-Jain diaspora. Currently, he is translating Jaina Darshan, a monumental text on the philosophy of Jainism, and is working on his fourth monograph, Makers of Modern Jainism. He's co-editing the Encyclopedia of Hinduism, as well as a volume on Indian and Western philosophical concepts in religion. He's also the author of award-winning Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities, Sustenance and Sustainability, a book that I think we all must refer to. His articles have appeared in several academic journals and in Huffington Post, Washington Post Forum on Faith, Times of India Speaking Tree, and Pathos. Dr. Jain is widely quoted in various American and Indian media outlets, and Morgan Freeman interviewed him for the section on Jainism in the TV series The Story of God. He's active on social media handles and is known for his regular tweets. So here is Dr. Jain with us, and he's going to be delivering his address on influence of Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita on EcoDharmic activism of Bishnois and Swadhyayis communities. I hand it over to our esteemed speaker of the day. He has 45 minutes to deliver his address. Over to you, Dr. Jain. Jayashree, unmute him. I think there is a little problem of the sound.
Okay.
That's
no, I cannot myself. Yeah, speaker cannot be mute. So, thank you so much for inviting me. We have been in correspondence for various projects with Dr. Nirban in the Department of Philosophy at your college, Kamala Nehru College, University of Delhi, and finally we get to meet each other, see each other, and I shared a little bit from my first book, which itself was the result of my PhD dissertation that I finished from 2004 to 2008 at the University of Iowa. Since the topic is, I think, one of the most beloved topics of all of us, all of us students and professors, scholars, researchers of the Indian traditions, like your department chair mentioned, that Mahabharata, as we know, one of the longest, or probably the longest text ever written in the world. Many times over. Even if we combine Greek epics and multiply 5 times, and still Mahabharata is the longest. But length is not the only, number of words is not just the only criterion that we love Mahabharata so much. Mahabharata is full of wisdom, full of relevance, full of real practical concerns of life, as we all know. We have seen Mahabharata in our films, in our TV serial. I think there is not a single day when there is some portion of Mahabharata is not coming on one of the TV channels in India, as I've heard, Mahabharata or Ramayana. So it's just, I think we can use the word mesmerizing text, and we just love to talk about it, learn from it, and so on. You already have this wonderful series, by the way. Also, I didn't think twice to accept the invitation when I came to know that this wonderful series is going on, and thanks to your energy and your initiatives, wonderful series. So since your previous speakers have already spoken so much, I think, from philosophical perspective, Dharma and relevance and so on, and my own work a little bit is more towards environmentalism. So I have to think how I can make my work relevant to your series. So I have to go back to my first book topic of EcoDharma of Bishnois and Swadhyayis, and how they have actually, when I went back to look for Mahabharata references, I was astounded. It's full of Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita references by the founders and leaders of these two communities, Bishnois and Swadhyayis. There's actually a third community also in my book, but today I'll just focus on because then it will be too much. So I'll just focus on the two communities, Bishnois and Swadhyayis. So let me share the screen and let's go from there. All right, I think you can see my screen now. So Mahabharata for EcoDharmic activism. So ecology or ecological awareness is a very new concept, and the Mahabharata is like thousands of years old text, as we know. And yet how this remains relevant, which is, I think, really interesting, that Mahabharata is not just a text where Mahabharata is not just a text where a portion of it, the Bhagavad Gita, is chosen as a cherry picking, and our Hindu saints, Hindu sages have been delivering lectures for hundreds of years. Of course, that is one of the most important application of Mahabharata in our daily lives, but also how this text has inspired, real groundbreaking work, at least in these two communities, that they are still doing that work, taking care of their natural resources and so on. And what does Mahabharata have to do with that? In Mahabharata, we don't see any very concrete or conscious environmentalism, and yet these two communities have taken inspiration from the Mahabharata. That's what I'm hope to share with you. All right, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so before we get into that, I also want to point out, or probably your previous speakers might have already pointed out, that if we forget to focus on the Mahabharata, or Mahabharat, in Hindi we pronounce Mahabharata, in English Mahabharata, what has happened, at least especially in the Oriental, with the advent of Orientalism in 18th century and British colonial Raj and so on, Indian traditions were looked at mostly from Nivritti perspective, that, oh, it's all world denying and our people are just sitting in caves and just, forgetting the world, ignoring the world and so on. But thankfully, last, I would say 20 years at least, there are several scholars such as David Haberman and many others who have actually looked at, the pravrittivad also in our tradition. It's not about simply sannyas and running away from the worldly problems, but the Indian traditions have also been applied to solve real world problems. That's what I also hope to always want to show in my own work, whatever I've written so far. So following in the footsteps of my senior scholars such as David Haberman, Chris Chappell, and Frederick, and so many others. So my work is also in that line of thinking, that looking for examples and looking for such examples where people, scholars, leaders have taken our text, and especially Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, and how it has been applied very positively to solve some of the world's problems, social problems, and so on. Also, I want to share one more recent text in 2006 by Swasthi Bhattacharya, who looked at the bioethics, ideas of bioethics in the Mahabharata. So my own work is environmental ethics, but I also want to share how Mahabharata has been looked from bioethical perspective. So, and an ethical perspective in general, how society remains a central concept in Mahabharata. Belief in underlying unity of all life that can be applied for bioethical and environmental ethical perspective. A responsibility and flexibility of Dharma. Dharma, I think it's very context sensitive. It's not like a commandment that, black or white, but Dharma is very flexible and very context sensitive. So that's what she mentions in her book. Multivalent nature of Hinduism, it takes several interpretations for different times and different space, depending on the situation, depending on the context, it can take multiple perspectives. Theory of karma remains very important for ethics. So karma and phala, which is the result of the karma, so that makes it very ethical also. And then of course, ahimsa paramo dharma, which is one of the most beloved lines for Jains, but actually it comes from the Mahabharata, which is not usually remembered for its non-violence, but here we have, of course, ahimsa paramo dharma. Non-violence is the supreme virtue, supreme ethic, also comes from the Mahabharata, as she shows Swasthi Bhattacharya in her book. Also, there's another scholar, actually, Arti Dhand, and you can look at her work as well, and those of you who are still researching on Mahabharata. So Arti Dhand, Swasthi Bhattacharya, David Haberman, and little bit of my work where Mahabharata has been applied in a very ethical context, how Mahabharata can inspire ethical, environmental ethics, bioethics, and so on. Now let's dive into Mahabharata, and I'm sure many of these verses are already familiar to many of you, most of you. So one of this is this, Dharana Dharma iti ahur, dharmen vidyartha prajaha yata sadharma, dharana samyuktam sadharma iti nishchaya. So which means that dharma is that which is upholding this worldly affairs and other worldly affairs. It's not just about rejecting this world and just worrying about the next world, but it's very world-affirming concept as Dharma is defined in the Mahabharata. It's about taking care of this worldly issues, societal issues, and of course also trying to take care of the spiritual, other worldly issues, or next birth, or Punarjan. So Punarjan and this Jan, both are equally important as Mahabharata defines Dharma, which comes in chapter 12, I think most likely Shantipur by Bhishma. Then Dharma, so Dharma is defined in various ways. So this is one of the definitions of Dharma in Mahabharata, that Dharma is that sustaining force that sustains this world and the other world. Then the Dharma is defined in the Bhagavad Gita as probably the most popular verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadhatmanam sadamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. We get to recite, at least I get to recite this verse only rarely, so I thought I'll take this opportunity and recite the whole verse. So here Dharma is, I think, defined as cosmic law. Dharma is not just religion. Dharma is not even ethics here. Dharma is not about even sustaining the force, as a sustaining force. Dharma is simply a cosmic law or a cosmic rhythm, or what many scholars, and including my own little bit work that I've done, is Dharma is equated with rhythm of the Rig Veda. Right? So rhythm was the word that Rig Veda uses before Purush Sukta, and then Purush Sukta replaces rhythm with Dharma. So Dharma is rhythm, and rhythm as a cosmic rhythm, that which maintains the whole cosmic rhythm is Dharma. And when that Dharma is declining, when that Dharma is somehow disturbed, I guess still we can compare it with sustaining force. When the sustenance is somewhat agitated or disturbed or declines, then comes the avatar philosophy, that the supreme force takes human form, and or even animal form, or even as a fish can come and take care of to re-establish Dharma. That's our standard interpretation of this popular verse from the Bhagavad Gita. So avatar and Dharma are intertwined, really, intertwined and interconnected, right? So that's Dharma as a sustaining force, Dharma as a cosmic law or rhythm, and then Dharma as a duty. Even imperfect Swadharma is better than duty or role Dharma of a different Varna. That also comes across in some other verses in the Bhagavad Gita. So Dharma takes these multivalent interpretations in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Mahabharata, as we see in these different verses. Now come these two communities, Bishnois and Swadhyayis. Swadhyayis, I'm using the word as an adjective, but the original word the root word is Swadhyaya, which means self-study. So those who are practicing Swadhyaya, or those who are members of Swadhyaya Parivar, are called Swadhyayis, so practitioners or followers of Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya started somewhere in 1940s, which I show here, and Bishnois started somewhere in 1490s. So almost 500 years apart, but both leaders, Guru Jambeshwar, who was born in 1451 and lived up to 1536, and Pandurang Shastri Athavle, also called as Dadaji, lived from 1920 to 2003. But what we see as a nice common element in both is both of them were really devotees of Krishna, Vishnu, and Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. They took a lot of inspiration from both Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, larger Mahabharata. Now, interesting thing is that really what I want to really highlight is that, like I said in the beginnings, Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita is not just for Sanskrit scholars. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think Guru Jambeshwar was a Sanskrit scholar. He was born in some really small village, Pipasar in Bikaner or Jaisalmer border region, really desert region, true desert region, if you can imagine. He was born in such a village. And I don't think that he ever got to learn Sanskrit texts in their original form. And yet, because of this general consciousness around him, most likely, he was also familiar with Krishna and Mahabharata concepts and Mahabharata stories, legends, myths, and Bhagavad Gita and whatnot. So he takes those elements from the Mahabharata and gives his rules, gives his ethics, gives his teachings completely based in the phenomenon of Vishnu and Prahlad and Krishna and so on. So it's a very rooted Vaishnav community in a way, Vishnu community. Some scholars even venture out to say that Vishnu word maybe, the original word might be Vishnoi, which comes from Vishnu. But now most Bishnoi themselves use the word Bishnoi with a B, which simply means they say that Bishnoi is derived from 29, 20 Bish and Noi 9. So 29ers in English, some people have translated as them as 29ers. So these are the two communities, again, 500 years apart, but both take inspiration from the Mahabharata, Vishnu, Krishna, and the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, Pandurang Shastri Athavale was a great Sanskrit scholar. He could recite almost entire Mahabharata and entire Bhagavad Gita, by his memory, his great memory, and great Sanskrit scholars. He had actually studied Upanishads and Vedas and Gita in their original form. And so he even has this title of Shastri. But Guru Jambheshwar was not a Sanskrit scholar, and yet for both of them, the inspiration remains the same. Even the Bhil community, actually, which is not the topic of today's talk, but even Bhil community has their own versions of Mahabharata, and they also take inspiration from Ramayana and Mahabharata, but from their own versions of Bhil Ramayana and Bhil Mahabharata. So these are the two communities we are focusing. Now, taking even a bit deeper look at the Bishnoi community. Founder's name, as I mentioned, Guru Jambheshwar, and all his teachings are codified and compiled and collected in what is called as the Sabad Vani. Sabad means Shabd, which means statements, Vani, speech. So all his teachings are now nicely compiled in ancient archaic Rajasthani language, but it has been now translated into Hindi, and then I translated into English as well for my first book. So in that Shabdavani, very like with real devotion, loving devotion, bhakti, whichever word you want to use, he uses these words and greatly cites these, with a lot of devotion and whatnot. He cites these examples of Yudhishthir as a great exemplar of Dharma, Karna as a great sacrificer, great practitioner of donation, dan, everything that he donates. Vidura as also a very wise person from the Mahabharata. And then Duryodhana as a negative example. Do not become like Duryodhana. Do not become egoistic or arrogant like Duryodhana. So he cites even Duryodhana's name. And of course, Bhagavad Gita examples, he cites a lot. Again, without quoting the Sanskrit text, but just the mere mention of these names, I'm sure even today, for us also, they bring some great legends associated with these names. That Yudhishthira we think of, we know what all Yudhishthira meant for Karna, what he meant for, and Vidura and Duryodhana, and then of course the Bhagavad Gita. So that's what he did also 500 years from now. So many scholars, actually many Western scholars, or even probably Indian scholars also, some of them, would say that all of this is very new. This is all neo-Hinduism or neo-Vedanta, that this is all of influence from the Western interaction with Indian traditions, that our people started looking for ethics in the Mahabharata. So this example from Bishnoi community, I think, can be used to reject that claim that everything that we see, any ethics that we see in our contemporary Indian traditions, is not just a reflection or reaction to Western interactions. Bishnoi leaders spoke of ethical ideas long before India's interaction with the Western thought. So it has been ingrained in many saints and sages, how they have used these ideas to inspire their followers to practice ethical ideas. So that's what I would highlight here. So that's the Bishnoi example. Then we come to the Swadhyaya example. What you see on your right upper hand window, the small window here, is a school called Srimad Bhagavad Pathshala in Mumbai. In Mumbai, a really crowded area. Mumbai is pretty crowded, but sort of heart of Mumbai is a place called Madhav Bagh, CP Tang, near CP Tang. I used to live in Mumbai many years ago, so I know that area a little bit. So in that, his father, Pandurang Shastri Athavale, Dadaji's father, Bajnathji, he established a school. That school itself he named as Bhagavad Gita Pathshala. So you see this inspiration clearly. Of course, as a modern saint in last 100 years, Bhagavad Gita has been one of the most interpreted text, commented text by our many Hindu sages and Hindu saints. So Bajnathji was no exception. So he chose Bhagavad Gita as his key text that he based his teachings based on the Bhagavad Gita. And so 1926 was the establishment of probably one of the first Bhagavad Gita Pathshala by name in entire India. So that happened in Mumbai. And when young Athavale was 22 years of age, he was born in 1920. And when he was 22 years of age, his father became sick. So overnight, instantly, Bajnathji transfers his leadership to this young Athavale, who is just 22 years of age. And he starts speaking, he starts delivering lectures discourses, pravachans, also based on the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and the Vedas. So that is the transition in 1942. And then he is delivering these discourses every Sunday without fail on Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. In 1954, there is an interfaith conference in Japan. So there he goes and again speaks on Krishna and Bhagavad Gita and so on. But there he is challenged by some of his foreign participants that you speak so highly of the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, but can you show us a single village in India, you know, mind you, 1954, show us a single village in India that is prospering based on the principles of the Bhagavad Gita or Mahabharata or Hindu Dharma in general. So that was a kind of a challenge to Pandavak Shastri Athavale Dadaji, at that time simply probably called as Pandavak Shastri Athavale. So he comes back from that conference and he decides to do some social upliftment project also, not just giving discourses, but first what he does is he establishes a residential school in Thane near Mumbai called Tattva-Gyan Vidyapith. It's a residential school still flourishing in Thane. And then his listeners, he inspires his listeners over time to go out in hundreds of villages, starting from Gujarat and Maharashtra, eventually Maharashtra, and then entire India and even entire world now. So his listeners, his regular listeners started taking inspiration from his discourses and started going and meeting fishermen and farmers and all the so-called downtrodden people spread across Gujarat and Maharashtra. And with those devotional visits, started coming, and that led to several socio-ecological projects over time, as I will show in a second. So that's how this entire transition happens from discourses to actual socio-ecological, EcoDharmic work that Bishnois are doing and Swadhyayis are doing. But before that, I want to share a little bit more on what exactly is the teaching that Dadaji takes, Pandavak Shastri Athavale takes from the Bhagavad Gita and connects it with nature. So chapter 15th, he talks about, he connects, of course, we all know this verse also, Urdhvamula Adha Shakham, Ashwatham Prahuravyam, Chandansi Yasya Paranami, Yastam Veda Sa Vedvit. So that line, as we know, this Ashwath Vriksh is shown as upside down. Right? So he connects, he interprets this verse as if it reflects the entire world, where the world is like a Ashwath tree. Vedas are the leaves of this entire world. So Vedas represent the fruits or leaves of knowledge. That's how the entire world or entire cosmos is imagined. So the image of tree is connected with the entire world, entire universe. That's one way of connecting nature with the Bhagavad Gita and the world. Second verse that he often used to recite is coming from the Vibhuti Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, Gyan Vigyan Yoga and Vibhuti Yoga. In chapter 7, Gyan Vigyan Yoga, it talks about Tatra Sa Gandhavati Prithvi, Punyo Gandhaha Prithivyam Cha. So in the first verse, Prithvi is imagined as Gandhavati. That's so, imagine, such a beautiful concept. I think that like we in India, right now there's the rainy season, so you all are enjoying that. Only India has that smell of earth as very pleasant and very refreshing. So that's what we see in Gyan Vigyan Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, as Dadaji would share in his pravachans. Then the other verse he would cite is Punyo Gandha Prithivyam. Yeah, so both of them are reminding us of that divine fragrance of Mother Earth, which is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Then in chapter 10, Vibhuti Yoga is full of divinity in nature. Every species is highlighted by Krishna, Yogeshwar Krishna in that Vibhuti Yoga. And among elephants, I'm Iravat, and among rivers, I'm this, among mountains, I'm that. And so divinity is mentioned across the universe, across nature. And that's I think, very interesting way to connect nature with the Bhagavad Gita and inspiring people to take care of nature, because nature is divine, because divinity is highlighted in the Vibhuti Yoga, in the Bhagavad Gita. Another example that he would give many times is that live like the lotus. Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karoti yaha lipyate nasa papena padma patram ivam bhasa, which means that live like the lotus petal, right? Lotus is in the mud, but lotus is untouched by the impurity of the world. So that's another example, again, taking the example from nature and inspiring all of us to live a very pure and unattached life. That's another example coming from Karma Sannyas Yoga, chapter 5, verse 10. So all of these verses now, and then as I was mentioning, so they took these inspiration, they listened to these verses for many, many years from Dadaji, and then people started going to the villages, remote villages in Gujarat and Maharashtra to begin with. So, and the word given by Dadaji for these visits was called as the Bhakti Ferry. Bhakti Ferry, where you go overnight and stay with villagers across Gujarat and Maharashtra, or Bhav Ferry, where you meet local neighbors in your own neighborhoods. So by these visits, by these ferries, you are offering your gratitude to Krishna, right? Because in Moksha Sannyas Yoga, chapter 18, verse 69, Krishna is telling Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Nacha tasman manuyeshu kashmichanme priyakritmaha bhavita nacha me tasmadanyaha priyataro bhuvi, which means that one who preaches the message of the Bhagavad Gita for the benefit of all is most beloved to Krishna. So Dadaji took this verse as one verse to inspire his listeners, go and spread the word of the Bhagavad Gita. Almost like you might compare it with Christian missionaries, but Dadaji would say that this is not missionary work. Missionaries are not doing anything unique. Before missionaries, Buddhist monks and nuns have taken the word of the Buddha and across Asia to Sri Lanka and Thailand and now the entire Asia, now entire world. So what Christian missionaries are doing has already been preceded by what Buddhist monks and nuns have done for hundreds of years across Asia in that time. Buddha himself said, preach my doctrine, spread my word. So what we are doing is not really, don't just compare it with Christian missionaries. We are just reaching out to our own people, our own Hindu people. We're not going and trying to meet other people. So meet our own people and just try to share this message of the Bhagavad Gita, share the message of Krishna with our own fellow brothers and sisters, especially in Gujarat and Maharashtra to begin with, and then entire India even. So this was done for many years. And then other words that he used, chapter 18, verse 46, Moksha Sannyas Yoga, Yatah pravrittir bhutanam, yena sarvam idam tatam, swakarmana tamabhyarcham, siddhim vindati manava. Okay, Sanskrit needs to be recited more often, otherwise we lose our practice, our habit. So in this verse, so visits was one thing. By this verse, what he did was he actually created socio-economic project. Ecology will come later, but first socio-economic project, because extreme poverty in our remote villages. So how can we combine bhakti with economy? So this is how one can do it, and Swadhyayis have done it. By one's own actions, one can attain perfection. And this verse was quoted by Arjuna to inspire his followers to devote their time and skill for God's work. What they would do is, let me show you, I think next slide. Yeah, so these are the socio-economic projects. So develop Vriksh Mandirs and Yogeshwar Krishi. Vriksh Mandir is a kind of an orchard, a garden where you grow the plants of fruit trees, so mangoes and chikus and bananas and whatnot. So entire village will come together as a family, take a land as some kind of a common devotional land. So land is also divine because that's Mother Earth. Then grow fruits there, and when you sell those fruits, whatever wealth you earn, the entire village will be treated as Mahalakshmi. That Mahalakshmi will be shared not as a donation to needy people in the village, but as a prasad, as a divine prasad to whoever is might need in the village. So socio-economic project, Vriksh Mandirs, so gardens, Yogeshwar Krishi, grow farms of grains or rice or whatever, and so similar concept, common land, and divine wealth. Then Matsyagandha is for fishermen people, fisher folks. So Matsyagandha, so all these names are also coming from the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. As you know, Yogeshwar is the name for Krishna. Matsyagandha is the name for Satyavati, mother of Vyasa. So Matsyagandha is again kind of a divine ship where fisher folk will come together. And Ekadashi, which is a holy day for Hindus, on Ekadashi, whatever is the catch, whatever fishes they catch, will be treated as Mahalakshmi. That for that day, Ekadashi, which is day of fasting anyway for Hindus. So use that wealth again for this prasad for needy people, not as a donation, without creating superiority complex, inferiority complex, but as a divine prasad, and so for socio-economic upliftment of that village. So all of these concepts were devised by Athavale, and then his followers, Swadhyayis, across Gujarat and Maharashtra, they implemented this. That almost we are coming, I'm not sure if I'm keeping track of my time, but I'm already now on the last slide. So basically both Bishnois and Swadhyayis, actually I didn't even speak of Bishnoi EcoDharmic project, we all know, but I think I'll share a little bit more. I should have added one more slide. That so by taking examples of Yudhishthir, Karna, Vidura, Duryodhana, and Yudhishthir, Karna, and Vidura and Arjuna for the most part, Bishnoi Guru himself created also many gardens. He planted trees. He constructed a lot of water bodies. What we now know as rainwater harvesting was first time probably done by Guru Jambeshwar 500 years ago. So all of those projects were treated as a divine work for Lord Krishna, and by those projects, eco-dharmic work was automatically done by his followers. So planting trees, creating these water bodies, protecting animals and birds also. Many people, Bishnois over centuries. We all know the example of Salman Khan, where Bishnois rush to the spot and catch Salman Khan when he's trying to hunt a black buck in Rajasthan, Jodhpur, between Pali and Jodhpur. But that is just one example. There are dozens and dozens of such examples over decades, over centuries even, where Bishnois are the first to rush to the spot, stop the hunters, stop the poachers, and even sacrifice their own lives in many instances just to protect their animals, their birds, their trees, and so on. So all of that eco-dharmic work has been done by Bishnois, taking inspiration from Yudhishthir and Arjun and Karn, as taught by Guru Jambeshwar 500 years from now. So that's Bishnoi eco-dharmic work, which I thought I'll add that as well. And then I shared the eco-dharmic work by Swadhyayis. Now, interestingly, in my research, when I asked Swadhyayis, are you doing this great environmental work? Are you really worried about climate change and all that? So every time I asked that question, they rejected my question itself. They said, we are not environmental activists. We are simply bhaktas. We are simply devotees. We are simply doing our duty, spiritual duty, to express our gratitude towards our Almighty, our Bhagwan. If there are environmental side effects, for example, if you plant a lot of trees, for example, in gardens and farms, and if you keep your oceans clean, your coastal areas clean by Matsyagandha and so on, environmental effects are pretty visible. But their focus is not environmental work. They are very proud in saying that we are simply doing our spiritual duties, spiritual bhakti. If there are environmental effects, these are simply byproducts. If there are economic effects, they are simply byproducts. If caste differences are getting reduced and society is becoming more equal, that's simply a byproduct. We are simply spiritual bhaktas. We are simply devotees. We are simply taking inspiration from the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata and Krishna and Arjun, and we are doing our duty as Arjun would have done. So Arjuna as a role model is the last slide, where he's inspired by Krishna to proactively perform his duty, but offer the fruits to the Almighty. Nimit matra bhave savisachi, like Krishna tells Arjuna. So just become nimitta, just become instrument for devotion. So by combining this, keep doing the action, but non-action perspective as a very detached manner. Bhakti ek samajik shakti hai. Bhakti can be a social force. Devotion can be a social force, as taught by Dadaji Athavale and as practiced by Bishnois over centuries. So that's how Arjuna, Mahabharata, and Bhagavad Gita specifically have both inspired Bishnois and Swadhyayis for centuries now, in Bishnoi's case, and for decades in the case of the Swadhyayis. I will stop here. As in Hindi we say, मैं वाणी को विराम देता हूँ यहाँ पे, और I'll take any questions that you might have.
Dr. Pala will conduct the Q&A section now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Pankaj, for this wonderful exposition into EcoDharmic life of Bishnois and Swadhyayas. Thank you so much for that. And it's very informative as well as like focus, perspective that you have presented to us. I'm trying to look for questions. Yeah, before people formulate their questions, let me begin. Just raising some of the general concerns that I have. Yeah, what I wanted to, like, the way you presented the life of the concern of Bishnoi community as well as Swadhyaya community, putting their life in consonance with the nature around them and concerning or protecting the nature. I would like to know what is their conception of life? How do they look at, how did they conceive the form of life itself. Okay, and how do they look at their own individual life? Do they see it as a part of it? And if they see it as a part of the larger nature, do they see a kind of consciousness which is building from nature to the individual? So, do they see as an integrated part of the nature, or do they see as protectors of nature? So, what kind of relation do they envisage when they stress this ecological perspective in their tradition?
Right. I'm reminded of Swadhyayis more specifically, because in Swadhyaya, what happens is that in living the daily life, we sometimes tend to forget all of especially the spiritual perspective. So what Swadhyayis have been doing for now, ever since that school started in 1942 onwards, when Dadaji took over, many decades. So every Sunday, every Swadhyay, every Sunday, doesn't matter wherever he or she is in any part of the world, every Sunday they must attend Swadhyay session. In those Swadhyay sessions, there are video recorded lectures by Dadaji in Hindi, Gujarati, or Marathi, with English subtitles now, especially for American audience. So there are English subtitles. So by Sunday, every Sunday reminder, it's almost again like you can compare probably as a church service for Christians. But Swadhyayis are doing also this as this global parivar. Every Sunday they must listen to these messages that are completely inspired by the Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and Ramayana and Raghuvansh and all of the Hindu texts, Kalidas, Abhigyan, Shakuntalam, all of those texts are cited by Dadaji as he delivers these pravachans. And every time every Sunday when they're listening to these discourses, the message is that this is the creation of the Yogeshwar, creation of Bhagwan. Bhagwan ki kriti hai, jo the universe is a creation of Lord. So it's a very, in a way, it's a very dualistic message. It's not non-dualistic purely. It's not Advait as such, but I see it mostly, I think, rooted in Vallabhacharya and Ramanuja, mostly Vallabhacharya actually. So Dvaitvad. It's a very dualistic concept. So there is Bhagwan, there is Bhakt. Bhakt must surrender to Bhagwan and take care of the creation of Bhagwan. The entire world is a creation of Bhagwan, and we are all connected because we are all children of the same God. Doesn't matter what religion, what caste, what creed, what color, and etc. We're all a global family, but he did use the word father. So our father is one God. We're all his children. So probably when they translate it in English, everything becomes very gendered. I think in English, probably in Hindi or Sanskrit, that's not so much the case. But so this, to answer your question, they imagine their position in the universe as this global family that is beyond one species. Even other animals are part of this one cosmic family, and so we should all maintain this spiritual relationship with each other and with other species, and even with rivers and mountains and trees and whatnot. So that's the idea. That answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, let me go with the questions that our audience have for you. Can we say that there is a sense of oneness in the actions one performs out of his or her swadharma? Which means if somebody is performing the actions out of swadharma, can we say that there is a sense of oneness in those actions? That's what one of the...
Yeah, so the sense of oneness, I think, is coming from the way that idea is reinforced every Sunday when they're listening to these pravachans, right? So that oneness in the sense of the entire world or entire cosmos, entire universe is one family, right? So what we are doing is that first, like he would say, asmita. So my own self-esteem has to be maintained also, but at the same time, esteem of other beings, other species also, because they also have the same divinity as I have. There is God in my heart and God in his or her or that species' heart also. So with that, with that concept or with that idea, everything is connected, everything is one. So this one cosmic family where everybody is related. This interrelationship is what is oneness.
Yeah. Let me go to the...
Sure. Only questions here.
I think there is a connectivity problem. Jayashree, can you unmute yourself?
I see a lot of questions here on the chat.
Okay.
I think Dr. Bala's internet connection has an issue. So in the meantime, I'm going to take up the questions which I can see here. Aditi Singh is asking, Dr. Pankaj, is there a divide between urban and tribal conscience in following Dharma, not due to lack of awareness, but rather a lack of understanding of the divinity of nature?
Right, that's a good question, and I have one full chapter on that divide, kind of a difference between how urbans are looking at environmentalism and how rural people are looking at environmentalism. My focus was Swadhyayis and Bishnois and Bhils that are all living in mostly villages, at least at that time when I researched, and probably even today. But what I scratched a little bit, I scratched the surface a little bit in the urban environmentalism also. And what I see is, I think, interesting that many of these NGOs or new groups that have developed over the last few decades, such as Sri Ravi Shankar's or Arshvidya Gurukulam, or and many others, Amma's movement in coming from Kerala, and many such. Especially looking at the urban Hindus in America, all these global movements that started in India, such as Amma's or Sri Ravi Shankar, and when they reached here in America, they come to us here in America in a very urbanized setting. They may be in villages also in India, but here at least, they're coming as a very urban, very cosmopolitan movements when they come here, right? So they all are, what I see common element in these global movements is they're all speaking English language, obviously, especially when they're trying to connect with Hindus in America. So using English language, they end up using mostly English categories. So religion and ethics and environmentalism are all separate categories, distinct categories in these movements, global movements. But if I contrast this with Swadhyayis, Bishnois, and Bhils, they're using Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi language. So for them, it's all Dharma, right? So Manushya Dharma and Prakriti Dharma, Vriksha Dharma, Agni Dharma, so Sanskrit, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, those languages are using the same word Dharma, which has multivalent interpretation. So it is why Dharma, to practice ethics is Dharma, to respect river or revere river is also Dharma, to recognize that there is Dharma of Prithvi or Agni, physical characteristic is also Dharma. Ethics is Dharma, physical characteristics is also Dharma, and environmentalism is also Dharma. So that's how it's more this, I think, ambiguity around Dharma works pretty good for people who are still thinking in Indian categories, because that one category can take several interpretations, and it's very fluid category. So it connects pretty well, going back and forth between ethics and physical characteristics, environmentalism, spirituality, and so on. And in urban setting, it's also working, but in a more using more Western categories of religion. This is my religion, so I do meditation or whatever, or chant some mantras, and then very very consciously I will go and clean my riverfront. For example, some people do in New York. Even Hindus are trying to clean up some riverfronts in New York. So that's very consciously I'll go and get a photo clicked, and I'll probably share it on my social media, and I'm being environmentalist now for this weekend. Or I'll write an op-ed, or I'll write a small post on my Facebook. It's I did this nice environmental little work. Whereas Bishnois and Swadhyayis are doing this huge projects for decades, for centuries, and probably no photo op or no conscious environmental work. It's not just practicing Dharma. I don't mean to belittle anybody. I mean, it's all important work, and everybody's doing from different perspectives.
I'll go a little backward and forward till Dr. Bala joins in. I'll take the last question first. Jayashree, has Dr. Bala joined?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, I joined, but that's okay. Please go ahead. Suddenly I lost my connectivity. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Gita.
I'll touch upon the last question, and then you can take up later. Dr. Pankaj, the next question comes from Yogesh Maisuria, and it is, what's the difference between Swadhyay and other godly work?
I don't know what
it's the last question.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure what he means, but that other godly work, what I remember, I have to, and we all have to remind ourselves that the English words that we are using, even I am speaking English, but Swadhyay people were using all Indian languages, right? Daji himself and his followers, his practitioners also. So in Sanskrit, Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi languages, when they were using these words, they are still using these words. They are using the word Prabhu Kari. Swadhyay is Prabhu Kari, right? So now Prabhu is most likely a Vaishnavite divinity, imagination or interpretation, right? So Prabhu Kari is when they are trying to go and meet their fellow neighbors or other people living in remote villages, or establishing a new Vriksha Mandir or establishing a new Yogeshwar Kashi or Matsigandha, that's also Prabhu Kari. So if it is done with that spiritual perspective, I think any work that is done with spiritual perspective would be Prabhu Kari, I think, trying to apply the Swadhyay definition. So I'm not, yeah, that's how I would define that godly work. That would be godly work or spiritual work.
Yeah. Since we are talking about Mahabharata, there is a question related to Yudhishthira and Pandavas here that we find. Yudhishthira responds emotionally and he feels compassionate for the animals. He uses Daya as the Pandavas, but the Pandavas' right to kill the forest animals is not questioned, not even by the animals themselves. Why is this paradox? No, the Yudhishthira talks about Daya and towards the compassion towards the animals, but their right to kill the animals is not questioned. So there is a paradox that is visible. How do you look at that?
Entire group of Nagas are burnt alive. There was a very painful episode of the Mahabharata.
Khandava Dahana. Yeah, there is a question on that as well. How do these communities see the burning of Khandava forest? You can take up both the questions together.
We're also familiar with all these parts of Mahabharata, and it's not easy to go back in that time and from our perspective and how they did all those things and still teaching about Daya and Ahimsa and all that. I guess we can all just take little humble attempts to interpret what all was going on at the time. So Duryodhana had taken everything from the Pandavas, as we know, right? And all they were left with these 5 villages, which included this kind of one also. So I don't know if they had any other choice but to establish their kingdom at the expense of those of that forest and those serpents that were living in that forest. So I guess when left with no choice, they had to resort to that violence. And violence is what we see in the entire war, 18 days of war, and it's all full of violence. Everything is not just serpents, but humans are killed. Their great-grandfather Bhishma is killed, as we know, right? Drona, their guru, is killed, and on and on, right? On and on. And you know, so many things. We all are so much expert. Everybody is an expert on the Mahabharata. But I think the message still at the end, as I was trying to quote that Swasti Bhattacharya's book and Arti Dhan's book, that at the end, the message still is a very stark, very stunning reminder, stunning message, stunning moral lesson that violence is not the solution, I think. Violence will not violence should not be the first option, at least. It should be the really, really last option after several attempts of Krishna trying to avoid violence and failing every time and still trying and failing and trying, failing and so on. Then only that violence was, so that's the last option. And I think probably that interpretation can be applied to this burning down of Khandav one as well, that was the only place left for Pandava. Where else would they go? Otherwise, they would have to go back to their Agyatvas or the 12 years of Vanvas again, which was probably not the choice at that time. So that's why probably they ended up burning down the forest. Right? I'll attempt that way.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, let me go to the next question. Like, is there any similarity between Swadhyaya community and Varkari Sampradaya in following rituals? I don't know whether you're familiar with Varkari. Yeah.
Right. Rituals are similar. I think Varkari is the Sampradaya that is connected with, if I'm not mistaken, Namdev and Tukaram and Ganeshwar, one of those, or probably all. Yeah, it's some overlap with those communities, Pandharpur and all that. Right. So yes, there are, of course, Dadaji would cite all these great saints, Namdev and Tukaram and Ganeshwar and Pandharpur and Pandurangashtakam by Shankaracharya, and all of those texts are Sanskrit texts, and all these Marathi texts, Marathi saints are all just on his fingertips. All the time he's citing these great examples. But he distinctly maintained a distinct identity for Swadhyaya. So take all these inspiration, take all the examples, and but Swadhyaya remained as a, and all the rituals are also used, sort of reinterpreted. So Ekadashi and Tirth Yatra, all of that are very much in practice, but they are given new names. So Tirth Yatra will become Bhakti Feri. Tirth Yatra, yes, you will go to Pandharpur or you will go to Badrinath, Kedarnath, but also go to remote villages of Gujarat. Meet your fellow neighbors, meet your fellow people from your own same culture. That's also Tirth Yatra because they're also divine. Everybody is divine. Every being is divine. So take care of your cows properly. So Goras was another example, another project, another prayog, as you would call. Take care of cattle properly. Take care of your trees properly. Take care of earth properly. Sea coast properly, and on and on. So Tirth Yatra, of course, Pandharpur, Varkari Sampradaya, but also Saurashtra and Gujarat and Maharashtra and entire India and eventually entire world. Yes, so some overlaps and some differences.
Yeah, great. Is there any difference in the philosophy of two communities regarding divinity of nature and its impact on them, like between Bishnois and Swadhyaya communities that the questioner is referring to?
I would say that idea of divinity in nature is same in both and across, probably all across Hindu communities, but the way they react, but the way they have incorporated these ideas into their practice is a little different. I think Bishnois are taking a bit more proactive role in really rushing to the spot, making sure Salman Khan is caught and Salman Khan is behind bars. That kind of activistic zeal is a bit more in Bishnoi communities for some reason. I'm not aware of any Swadhyaya example where they would come and try to defend, let's say somebody is trying to kill an animal in their village or trying to cut some trees in their villages. I'm not aware of an example where Swadhyaya would rush to the spot and catch that poacher or hunter and give him to police. So that kind of physical energy is more manifested in the Bishnoi examples. There are dozens of examples, not just one Salman Khan example, but many such examples. So that's probably a little difference in the way they have reflected.
Yeah, the other question that we have is similar to Ahimsa. Even Anekantavada is also inspired by Mahabharata because of the varied and different definitions of Dharma referring to the same single reality of Dharma. And a continuation of that is, if Dharma is always contextual to various communities, is it not challenging elitism of any sort in terms of humans and its intra-species level?
Anekant was usually, I'm sure you all are already aware of, Anekant was usually we take in the context of the Jain philosophy where 7 Nayas are mentioned and how 7 different interpretations of a single reality are applied. And all these 7 perspectives are combined to form a whole reality. Usually we don't apply that word in Hindu context, but I guess we can apply, we can think from that perspective that Dharma is, I think more than, okay, the difference is that Anekantvad says that each perspective is partial, right? And then unless we combine all these 7 perspectives, we arrive at the final reality. But here that's not the case in the Mahabharata's case or the Bhagavad Gita's case. Dharma is a standalone definition, let's say just cosmic law, or Dharma simply as a duty, or Dharma simply as religion, is not a partial definition. It's a whole definition in that particular context. So I think the word to be used probably is more towards context sensitivity in Dharma's case in the Mahabharata or Bhagavad Gita, whereas Anekantvad is, I think, really different. Let's not confuse different words in different contexts. So Anekantvad, let's keep it for Jain definition. And here it's more, I'm not sure what's the Hindi or Indian term for context sensitivity, but we have to all think together and come up.
The other question that we have is the Vaishnava communities seem to find God in every creation. It is reflected also in Jaina Anekantavada and multifaceted realities. Is it so?
Right. Okay.
That's basically trying to see the relation between Jainism and Vaishnava community. So I'm trying to relate Anekantavada. Yeah.
That's a good one, because Jainism and Bishnois and Swadhyayis, they're all pure vegetarians for one thing. That's one good similarity. And I'm also vegetarian, so I'm biased, I guess, a little bit. So, none of these communities would even consume eggs. No egg, of course, no meat, no seafood, none of that. So pure vegetarians, but also they all consume dairy products. They're not vegans. So lacto-vegetarians, they're all. That's one common element. But that has led some observers, such as forgetting the name, a couple of scholars have imagined Bishnois as a subsect of Jainism, which is not right. This is false. Bishnois are purely Vaishnavites, definitely in Hindu tradition, not Jainism. So Bishnois are not Jains, but Bishnois are one of the Hindu sampradayas. We can imagine them as. Swadhyaya as one of the new religious movement, also within the Hindu Dharmic tradition. And talking about Jainism, Jain Anikantvad is not trying to recognize divinity in every creation. No, that's not the case. In fact, Jainism does not even recognize divinity in anything. There is no Brahman, overarching Brahman as such. Each Atma, each soul is distinct and separate and will remain separate forever, even after moksha. So there is no Brahman, and there is not all Atmas are part of any Brahman, none of that. Jainism is pretty different, really different from all of that. And every being has a soul. Each soul can be potentially divine by attaining the moksha, but each soul has to follow its own path until that destination comes. So cows are not sacred because they're divine for Jains. Cows are sacred because cows also have soul, and each soul is to be respected and left alone. Do not torture anybody. Do not cause pain to anybody, because every being has a similar soul. So one must respect and practice non-violence. So there's little subtle difference between the Hindu way of non-violence and non-violence.
Yeah. How Mahabharata answers the betterment of human at the expense of environment. Yeah, basically the question is, does it support betterment of human condition at the expense of environment? There are instances which tell us that, as you pointed out, Khando Dahana, there are instances which point out this aspect.
As a last resort, we already discussed.
Yeah, you already discussed that. There are certain questions on characters themselves from Mahabharata. Like, according to Shekuni, what is dharma in life? And similarly, like there is another question on Shekuni. Yeah, what is the difference between dharma of Krishna and dharma of Shekuni, and how it is affecting on our daily life? So these are more general kind of ones. So how do you look at them? No, if you can look at the conceptions of dharma according to Krishna and Shekuni and Arjuna, these are the characters that people have asked questions on.
I'm sure the one who is asking the question already has the answer. It's just so, I mean, we can go on and on. Mahabharata is endless. And, I guess we can think aloud and say that there is a Dyut dharma also, the dharma of gambling, right? So Shakuni is an expert in that dharma, and Krishna is an expert in practicing his dharma to remind Arjuna of his own Kshatriya dharma, so that he can practice his Kshatriya dharma to re-establish the cosmic dharma, right? So yeah, different dharmas for different situations, and the end goal or end result was to try to re-establish the cosmic societal dharma, and that's what was the goal. And that's
basically. Basically, I think what the questioner has in his or her mind is like, how do these characters that we see in Mahabharata, how do they affect our everyday life? Is there anything that we can take from the characters of these Mahabharata, which can be helpful to our daily life? That's what they're asking. Like, when they asked about Krishna, Shekuni, as well as Arjuna, that's what they were hinting at.
Yeah, that reminds me of another.
As you're pointing out, we just have to think louder and try to see, infer certain things which would be useful to our daily life. Yeah, please go ahead.
One more example, also coming from Dadaji's discourses, in which he will say that there are three characters in Mahabharata, and again, we can go on and on. There is Arjun, there is Karna, and there is Duryodhan, right? Duryodhan is one who does everything for himself, very selfish and arrogant, selfish. Then there is Karna, who does everything for his friend's sake, for Duryodhan's. He sacrificed his own life for Duryodhan's case. And then there is Arjun, who does everything but for God, for Krishna. So we should follow the example of not Duryodhan, not everything is for myself, not even Karna for him, for everything is for somebody else, but we should follow the example of Arjun, for whom every action is for God. It's for divine work. So surrender to God, surrender to Krishna, and then do your activity. Then follow your actions. So that probably answers a little bit on the question.
Yeah, great. The other question that we have is regarding Bhima. Bhima is seen to be destroying trees at times for fun, and during Vanaparva as well. Can we idolize them for protecting environment?
Probably not. It's destroying so many trees.
Yeah.
That's why Bhima
But
is
yeah,
not that. Bhima is not the ideal, I guess, but Arjuna probably is. And the idea is to
right.
surrender and reduce the arrogance, reduce the selfishness, and be more spiritually aware and do everything as a devotion, as a surrender to or prasad to God. Yes.
Yeah, this is regarding the food, gunas and food. Why does Krishna say food determines gunas of a man? What are tamasic food? What is tamasic food according to him?
Right. Yeah,
Since
that's for that.
you're
Just
talking about vegetarian food.
Yeah. Tamasic, Sattvic, and Rajasic are, I'm sure you can find thousands of pages on Google. There are food and our music, our time of the day, our human qualities, I think even species are all divided in these three gunas across the universe. These three gunas are very, very prominent in Hindu tradition, and this comes from the Sankhya Yoga. And there are tons of articles, books written online, and even academic journals. Even there is a full academic book on these three gunas, and so that's how it's connected. If you eat sattvic food, you develop sattvic qualities, which is again more to do with surrender to God and be less and less selfish and so on. Rajasic is, I think, more towards sort of passion and a little bit more selfishness and whatnot. So yeah, we can.
Great. Thank you so much for responding to the questions. In fact, some of the questions are not completely focused on what you spoke, but even then, you try to respond to them. Thank you so much for that.
I get excited with Mahabharata. So many questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, when you have such a wide range of general audience as well as scholars on the net as viewers, it is very difficult, because the variedness of the questions would be very rich. Yeah, thank you so much for your response.
To make people more interested in the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. It's not just for older people, not just for sages and saints. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That is what the purpose of this Mahabharata webinar, creating interest among the various sections of people. And as we see, we find very young scholars as well as established senior people as well coming and showing interest in this webinar. That's what is the strength of this webinar. Yeah. May I request Dr. Geetesh to take over the proceedings? Dr. Geetesh?
Thank you, Dr. Bala. Okay. I would like to first thank our esteemed speaker for shedding light on the topic. Before I go ahead with the traditional vote of thanks, I would like all the participants to switch on their cameras, the videos, so that we can take quick screenshots for our records. I request all of you to switch on your videos. I think we are done with the screenshots. Thank you all for going by the points that we mentioned right in the beginning, for keeping the videos off and the sound muted. This really helped us in going ahead with the proceedings without any errors. Herein, Dr. Pankaj, it has been a wonderful moment for us to have you here talking about Mahabharata, starting with the message on non-violence, the oft-quoted verse as Ahimsa Parmo Dharma, and very wonderfully, you explicated how non-violence has inspired the eco-activities of Bishnois and Swadhyayis communities. The point that we all need to know, especially the audience, which has the number of participants who have been a part of this series of webinars, that we are seeing the different perspectives through the lenses of the speakers, is how Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita both the text or either of the text have inspired people. In the last address, Professor More talked about the political activism that Bhagavad Gita portrays. And today, Dr. Pankaj talked about the devotional part, that how these communities have taken up the teachings from the perspective of the devotion and then brought it to the level of activism. I think that's a point that we need to reflect upon, especially the younger researchers and the scholars. And this is basically the very motive of our project, the webinar series, to have varied perspectives, have various viewpoints which we can reflect upon in the further research. So Dr. Pankaj, thanks a lot for joining us and giving us time when it's early morning for you in US. I thank you on part of the organizing team, Professor Bala, and yes, Department of Philosophy and Kamala Nehru College for having been there with us. I thank all the participants for constantly supporting us through your innumerous registrations that we see each time. Herein, I would like to even convey to you once again at the end of the session that we have the 3 social media handles. Follow them. You would get to know more and more about our activities, as well as try to spread out the word. And those of you who want to listen to the address once again, we have been live streaming our all addresses on YouTube. Very soon you will be seeing them in a more edited version. So try to encourage more of your friends to follow us so that we also get a kind of a feedback to improve upon this series. And herein, last but not the least, I would like to convey that the series started on the first Saturday of June, and Professor Bala, our fellow scholars, and yes, the whole team really has a kind of a vision to continue with the series for the whole year, making the best use of this platform, the online platform, while accepting that yes, we can learn as well as reflect physically as well as through the online mode. So I thank all of you. It's night time for us in India. So I must say good night to you and good morning to you, Dr. Pankaj. Thank you all. We look forward to having you once again on the coming Saturday. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.